All right, so for women who are in their 20s and are university students, would you say that it is possible to finish your studies and have children without waiting too long?
I'm laughing and I'm looking up at Veronique, and I wondered if you might want to field that question, Veronique.
Well, I did. I got pregnant when I was 21 in law school, and I finished my law degree, taking 1 more year to do it. So, and then I went on to get a master's. Several years later, 8 years later, I came back to finish my master's degree. So it is feasible. It just takes determination.
And a different time frame.
And focus. Mm-hmm. And a different time frame. Because it comes down to, when you asked, in one of your previous questions, like why the money question, you know, if it's fair. Well, the system is unfair. You know, for sure. It's not fair that I had to take 1 or 2 more years because I had a child. But if we never challenge the system, it will remain unfair. And so that's what I did. I was counseled to have an abortion, and I didn't. And so, yeah, it took me longer. And am I in my career where I would be if I had had one? You know, if I didn't have children? I'd probably be in a different space, career-wise, for sure. You know, there's no question about that. Would that make me a better person? I don't know. You know that there's not knowing. This is my life. This is my path. So I would say, yes, it is possible. You just have to do it, and you have to be open to different ways of doing things, and what your teachers or your parents are telling you, or society at large is telling you, this is how you do things. This is, at 22 you'll get a degree, at 25 you get a promotion, at 30 you get the boy, at 33 you get the girl. So, you know, if you're ready to challenge these assumptions, just do it. Yay.
Jennifer Roback-Morse is very, she's this illustrious PhD economist, taught at one of the big Ivy League schools, and she is so funny when she describes her own journey, because she talks about how she had it all set out. She will have the child over the summer break, and it would like plan right down to this level, right? And then she discovered she was experiencing infertility, and they couldn't have kids at all. And so they started an adoption process, she and her husband, and then ended up with 2 children at exactly the same time, which her joke is something like, that's a miracle even for a Catholic. So she basically, it's this idea, this false idea that we can tightly control absolutely everything that happens to us, and I reject that as well.
So the arguments that have come to the forefront of the pro-life movement recently, like yours at Pro-Women Pro-Life and the Tim Tebow ad, seem to be changing the texture of the movement in a positive direction. How can we continue this?
Well, I think we need a lot more journalists who are able to take on this topic with some depth and some gravitas. I think that would go a long ways to changing the culture. And then people who are happy to stand up and talk. And in particular women, I think it's more meaningful. But I think on this topic I'm very hopeful. I hope it's not naive, but I think that there is a positive momentum, and it's the change will slowly occur in our direction. It can hardly go any further the other way, that's for sure.
All right, and what role do men have in this continuum?
I think one of the strengths of the pro-life movement is the idea that women and men should partner, that we're not clashing, we're in a partnership, and that is something that's lacking, in my opinion, in the average feminist discourse. They're always juxtaposing men and women as clashing, and men as the rapists and the attackers, and this is a big problem in how you consider male-female relations, and I think men and women are perfectly compatible, able to work together. What was the question again? That's a problem when you meander so long that you can't remember.
Oh, it's all right. In changing the direction of the movement, what's the role of men?
Right. For men, also likewise, to stand up and be vocal and not kowtow to some very, very militant, loud, unpleasant women on this issue.
So do you think that the decline in women's studies programs in Canada is proof that the pro-woman, pro-life truth always wins?
Well, I don't know, and I'm sure there's some debate over whether they actually are declining, and I've been tracking in the National Post with the ire of some feminists writing in from women's studies programs because there was a National Post editorial claiming that their programs were disappearing and good riddance, basically. So I tend to think that if you want to be super successful and if you're very driven in your career, if you're wanting to do law, you study law. I just, for me anyway, and I never did ever venture into the women's studies halls at U of T, and I never even went into the library for a women's studies book. I just don't think that way. But if you want to be successful as a doctor, you go to medical school. If you want to be successful as a lawyer, you go to law school. I don't understand what women's studies is doing. I don't. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of driven women out there and they're doing fantastic things, and I'm not 100% sure that they got to their positions through women's studies programs. And I'm not meaning to denigrate. I mean, you could just as easily make fun of political science too, right? But we're talking about women's studies, so I'll leave it at that.
All right, Andrea, so that's the last question we have right now, but if there's anybody out there who has a question, maybe spurred by something that's been spoken about during the period, we're going to have an opportunity to bring forward any questions you have to Teresa right here beside me. Otherwise, we'll be turning to the refreshment section.